Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Greg Reviews. Now, for this episode, I'm going to be reviewing Infamous Second Son. Now, you may not know you may not know this about me, but Sly Cooper isn't actually the only game that was made by Sucker Punch that I actually happen to like. I hap- that I actually happen to be quite a big fan of, because I'm a really big fan of the Infamous games. I've per I've played Infamous 2. I've played I played this well, I don't know if you call it a DLC game. It's more like an expansion of the second game. Expansion game of the second game, Infamous Festival of Blood. And I have to say it is perhaps one of my absolute favorite games of all times. Probably nowhere near as high as probably not as high as Sly Cooper is, but it's definitely among one of my top one of my top five, if not well, one of my top 10, if not my top five of my favorite video games. And that actually won't isn't that bad of a suggestion to do a top 10 list for my all-time favorite games. So I think I'll do that in my next episode. But for this one, I'm going to talk about Infamous Second Son, and in case this video will contain some spoilers, so if you haven't played the game yet, I recommend being able to, click off this video and play Infamous Second Son first. But, basically, with how good the Infamous games were, I haven't played the first one, but I do own the first one, and I want to be able to see if it's as good as the second one that I've played, since it's the first Infamous game I've played. And I want to see how much it compares to the second one, which I might do a review of that game after I play it, but for now I'm just going to focus on Infamous Second Son. And yeah, I feel like my opinion for this game is going to be a bit different than the very first Infamous game that I've played, because while I praise Infamous 2 quite a lot, I feel I'm definitely not looking forward to talking about Infamous Second Son, because yeah, I feel like it's just not a very good game, and I feel like with how hyped it was, I just feel like it doesn't live up to it. But I'm gonna go in depth with with my opinion about this, and why I believe it's not as good of a game as it's built up to be, or why it's not as good as people think it is. So basically, with the game, it starts out with our main antagonist, not antagonist, protagonist, Delson Rowe, who is pretty much your standard average troublemaking protagonist. And yeah, as if we haven't had those types of protagonists in video games before, like Dante from Devil May Cry, or sometimes Cole McGrath from Infamous, or with Crash Bandicoot, or Spyro the Dragon, or 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 with Sly Cooper, or with am I am I missing anyone? Am I missing anyone? Basically, my point is that having a making sort of bad boyish protagonist, it's getting kind of stale, and it doesn't really add much depth to his character. I will say that I will say that during the video game, it does touch on a little bit with this sort of war between co- conduits who are basically people who have been bio who have been biologically mutated into being superhumans, having all these really interesting and super cool powers, and they're being hunted. But a lot of them are being hunted by this organization called the DUP, which I forgot what it stands for. Let let me go ahead and check that. Yes, the Department of Unified Protection, and they're basically this government funded program that that kid that pretty much just kidnaps conduits who are basically people who have incredible powers through a genetic mutation, and they take them to this maximum detention facility in this place called Curtin K. And they're pretty much kind of like a umbrella, but they don't quite have they're not quite as complex as Umbrella is, and they don't have the interesting backstory after backstory of corruption like Umbrella does. And they're led by the main antagonist Augustine, she's pretty much Sophia Lamb from BioShock 2, who's this female antagonist who's always looking down on her enemies and always believes herself to be this ultimate authority for good on society, and anyone who questions her will definitely be met with a swift and painful end, like with what she did with one of the characters. His name is I believe his name is Henry. Henry, if I can just look that up real quick. Sorry if I keep doing this with you guys. Like I said, InFamous Second Son. It's not really that interesting to me. So I feel like oh yeah, Henry Doherty. Yeah, yeah, he has this ability to be able to manipulate smoke and all that stuff, but he's pretty much just this standard power hungry criminal. And yeah, that's pretty much this game's biggest weakness, is that it doesn't try to give that much definition, that much character development with a lot of their characters, except for a few characters like Fetch and who is like Fetch and like Eugene, which I'll talk about those two in a second. But in terms of gameplay, I feel like this game I feel like this game is just really way too cutter, and I know that's kind of like Infamous's thing, to be able to like have you choose between a good side and an evil side. But the thing is with Infamous games, they at least portray those in a way that's interesting. They at least show the weight of those choices, and they at least be able to display the consequences for choosing those sides. But I feel like with this game, it just doesn't try to show the weight of that side that often. Well, even though I pretty much just only played the good side of the infamous. Infamous game. I might be able to play the evil side just to be able to see if there is some depth to it, but overall, I just feel like there's just not that much in terms of gameplay that makes this game stand out in terms how it how it is compared to the other Infamous games, because I really love how with the Infamous games there is some progression with the powers that you get, and while there is a bit of progression with Infamous Second Son, it just doesn't give as much of a payoff towards it as its predecessors. I will say though that it is kind of interesting to be able to pick through different sorts of superpowers with the game itself, but as I've said, there's just not really that much weight to it in ter- in terms of how the the gameplay progresses the story, or whether or not it differentiates itself not just from its predecessors, but how it differentiates itself from other games. Period. But now that I've gotten the gameplay and kind of the story out of the way, I kind of want to talk a bit about the characters. Delson, as I've mentioned, he's pretty much just your typical standard, like, troublemaker protagonist. And yeah, and yeah, sorry, my throat's a bit dry. And yeah, it's not there's not really that much that separates him from other troublemaker protagonists. I can definitely think of a couple off the top of my head, like Dante, and with Sly Cooper, and with Juan from Avatar Legend of Korra, and with Aang himself from Avatar The Last Airbender. There's just not really that much depth with Delson's character in terms of how he separates himself from those characters. And with those characters, they at least have some things that differentiate themselves from this wide pantheon of characters from video games, TV shows, movies, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. While the game does try to give more of a point to Delson, does get does try to give a point to Delson's character, it just kind of falls flat in terms of how the story just progresses with Delson being this like ultimate protector or ultimate destroyer who thinks that humanity is just way too weak to survive. And I have to say, another, however, with even though there's characters like him and characters like Augustine, and there's this one like motherly character who's a Comish like Delson. They talk about how the Comish never turns their back on their family, which I will say that is an interesting that is an in, that is another good idea that this game has, which it doesn't unfortunately it doesn't explore all that much, which is to be able to add more types of culture to video games, which I myself definitely would enjoy that, especially since the Mark of Cree is one of my favorite games of all times. And it has some Polynesian culture built into the game, even though it's mainly just a fantasy based video game. But overall, I just feel like the characters that are on the side there, like Betty, I believe her name is yeah yeah Betty. She just seems like the typical like motherly, wise sort of character, which I'm not completely against, but I feel like there needs to be more towards adding to her character that makes her stand out. After all, we already have characters like that, like Aunt May, and with Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's a wise father figure for Luke, and and for Merlin from the Disney Sword of the Stone, who's a wise father figure to Arthur. If But at least some of those characters, they at least add something interesting. Again, there's a lot of characters out there that adds a lot to just being the wise elderly mentor character. While with this one, it just doesn't try to develop their characters enough to where there's a point across to them, or where they're more than just their respected roles. Not to mention, as bland as some of those characters are, the absolute worst one I feel like is in this game is none other than Delson's own brother Reggie. I absolutely hate Reggie, mainly because he is just this absolutely bossy, just this doubting sort of brother who will absolutely discourage Delson from using his powers whenever whatever the situation calls for him to do it. And that's just I feel like it just really grates on me so much, especially since there should be a lot of more of a point towards that. While yeah, there are it is kind of a scary thought to know that someone could have the ability to blow up buildings with just a snap right next door to you. But I feel like with how the game progresses and how Delson, depending on which side he's on, especially if he has absolute control of his powers and uses it for helping people instead of hurting them, I feel like Reggie should be more supportive. He should be the character that pushes Delson to keep go to keep go to keep going, to be able to keep helping out for the greater good. But still, I kind of get it. They don't want the typical character that just always kisses up to the main character. But the thing the thing is, Reggie just does not try to be able to. Just always just seems to reluctantly help Delson instead of doing it because it's the right thing and because he believes that Delson can do some good with his powers. Sorry. Who knows? Maybe his attitude is a bit more justified with the evil side, but overall, feel like I just feel like he just is one of those characters who just whines and complains about the main character for no good reason. Char char. Anyway, now that we've gotten my least favorite characters out of the way, let's talk about my two favorite characters. One of them being Fetch Walker, and I do find her story a lot more interesting than Delson's, and a lot more interesting than than this game, because she goes through a lot of struggles with her drug addictions and being able to try to deal with the absence of of her bro the absence of her brother Brent, who is who she accident who she accidentally who she accident who she accidentally struck down while she was while she was in kind of a, well, to put it nicely, she wasn't herself when she struck down Brent, and she's been mentally struggling since then, which I have to say, why isn't the game more about her? She has a lot more interesting backstory to her, and she has some really cool powers, like being able to control neon and being able to run super fast with the power of neon. That's pretty interesting. And I will say, I will say her game Infamous First Light, it does go in depth with her character a lot more than in the first game, which I feel like it makes Infamous Second Son just feel insignificant compared to that. Then there's another character which I really like called Eugene, who like me is a video game nerd who always felt like an outsider when it comes to how society views him. And considering the fact that he's a conduit, it just intensifies those feelings even more. Mainly because he has the ability to be able bring uh to bring to use video bring vid to manipulate video energy, which is how they termed it, to be able to bring angels and demons to life from this video game that he plays a lot. And even though he struggles a lot with trying to be able to be involved with the community and tries to even though he does want to help Delson in his own way, a lot of his feelings, a lot of his insecurities, and a lot of his fears get in the way of that, which I can definitely heavily relate to. Yeah, honestly, I don't know why the second game is about Fetch and Eugene. Those two characters are perhaps the most interesting out of the infamous Second Son. The game's infamous all the characters in Infamous Second Son, but of course they have to. This game has to be formulaic and formulaic. We can't have anything too different, can we? Especially when it comes to the end of the game, where we do see a lot of development with Fetch and with Eugene, who finally breaks out of his comfort zone and actually helps out Delson and Fetch and with and with and with every and with humanity as a whole to take down DUP. It just still feels like though that with all as interesting a character as Fetch and Eugene are, they're just forced to be around a lot of these bland and uninteresting and unlikable characters from the game. It just makes the game a lot more watered down and a lot more grating to be able to play through. But yeah, that's pretty much my opinion about Infamous Second Son. And yeah, even though there are some parts of the game where I do like with, well, for example, the gameplay does resemble the previous Infamous games a little bit, but it doesn't it doesn't try to be able to differentiate itself. And even though it does have some good ideas here and there about be able to confronting prejudice with ableism and confronting prejudice with people of different races, I against people with different races, I should say. I just feel like this is kind of a bad game. I just I just feel like it's just I just feel like I feel like only if you're like a diehard Infamous fan, and only if you're like interested in being able to be being able to explore the Infamous world a little bit more, if you're curious, then I won't stop you. But if you're looking for a really interesting, in-depth game that has groundbreaking gameplay and has interesting, in-depth characters, then this may not be the game for you. So yeah, this is definitely gonna be the first video game that I've reviewed on this channel where I'm definitely gonna give it a thumbs down instead of giving it a thumbs up. because it's just not a very interesting game, as I've said. It just doesn't do that much to be able to give the game that much weight to it and that much that much character development. But anyway, I think I've rambled on for a bit longer than I should. That's that's pretty much it for my review of Infamous Second Son. I definitely will be reviewing Infamous First Light, and I'll be and somewhere in the very near future, I will put a top 10 list of my favorite video games. Actually, nah, let's not make it top 10. Let's make it top 15. Yeah, there, 15. My name's Greg Miller, and I will see you next time.
And now for our bloopers.
Ah, there we go. The Department of Unified Protection. And basically, its main goal is to pretty much round up conduits and be able to, like, stir fear in people saying that conduits are bioterrorists and stuff like that. Which is kind of like the Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil, uh, except not quite as interesting as Umbrella and doesn't have the interesting backstory after interesting backstory of corruption like Umbrella does. I will say the only thing going for the DUP is that it does have an interesting concept with having conduits as field officers, like the big boss on top of DUP and the main antagonist of the whole game, Augustine. And yeah, she's pretty much the type of female antagonist who's a lot like Sophia Lamb from BioShock 2. She's pretty much this condescending female figure who's always picking apart her her enemies mentally and always seeking to find ways to control them and overshadow their potential. And yeah, there's really not that much interesting stuff about Augustine, which makes her kind of a bland character, especially in the end, where you face her and she's all like, "Oh, I'm trying to create Curtain K, which is this detention facility for conduits to be able to protect them from human society because normal people will never accept us for who we are and that we'll always be monsters to them." And I feel like that's another good thing going for this game. It does have some interesting messages, and it does. Oh yeah, the Department of Oh yes, the Department of Unified Protection, who's basically kind of like Umbrella if Umbrella. I'm losing what I'm trying to say. Ah, yes, the Department of There you go. Got that on my system.